Joining us now to talk more about the environment is Canada's premier environmentalist, David Suzuki. He joins us now from Toronto. A lot to talk about, Mr. Suzuki. On the Parliament Hill, there's been much debate about the fact that the Dion Liberals are poised to unveil some form of a carbon tax, and it's been proved to be very controversial. What do you think about trying to introduce something like this as gas prices are rising at the pumps? Political suicide or good politics?
Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, Canada is not breaking new ground here. Countries in Europe have had carbon taxes for a number of years, and it's certainly the way we've got to go. Canadians don't hesitate to pay $90 a ton to put garbage into landfills, and yet we act as if the atmosphere is limitless and we can dump stuff into it and not pay a price for it. It doesn't make any sense that we use the atmosphere as if it's a commons and there's no price to what we do.
Well, that is understandable, and I think people would buy that argument. But the way the Tories and the NDP, interesting political bedfellows here, because both the Tories and the NDP are against some form of a carbon tax. They're saying it's going to hit, the middle class and poorer Canadians. I'm
really shocked at the NDP on this, because I had thought that the NDP had a very progressive environmental outlook on this, and that astounds me. It's the same thing in British Columbia. We've got a government there that has imposed a carbon tax, and I take my hat off to them, because economists have been telling us this is the most effective way that we can get people to begin to change their behavior. And to have the NDP in British Columbia attacking this is really astounding to me, because there's just no question this is the way to go. It's a revenue neutral. It's not a tax grab. Governments can use some of the revenue that they get now to spend on the things that are going to help the poor people in terms of rapid transit. There's got to be some kind of tax rebate for people who are lower income. But to oppose this simply because I don't know whether it's ideological or what, is just nonsense. This is something that has got to come.
John Baird, the Environment Minister, was just interviewed by Craig, and Mr. Baird said that this is just basically a user pay system for big polluters, for big business. Is going to benefit big business. Bay Street loves it, and that the Liberals are just buying into to what they're saying.
Bay Street loves it? I thought that what we've got right now is a fossil fuel industry that the Canadian taxpayer is now still subsidizing at a time when they're making massive windfall profits, and now to say that they're reveling at the idea of a tax on their activity. I mean, I don't get that particular argument. I'm really disappointed. Mr. Baird, when he came in, said he was a believer. He believed that climate change was happening. He came in saying that he wanted to do something. I said, look, welcome. You can have a real political opportunity here. Canadians have rated the environment and climate as their #1 concern. You've got a real opportunity. He's never come back to the environmental community, which to me is his constituency. We're people that look to him. He's our guy. Why isn't he coming to us and saying, look, we need guidance in our activities into the future? Instead, he seems to be hammering environmentalists as if somehow we're bad guys, and he's I just don't understand it. I think most of the environmental community is begging Mr. Baird to come along and get our support and our help.
Well, he says that the Tory policies, the government's policies, are the right policies, that the big emitters are going to be paying in the end for this, and they're on the right track. You don't agree?
No, I don't.
And so what more should he be doing? Should he be buying into this carbon tax? Is that the only way to go, or is there another way to go?
Well, it's very, very late in the game. Canada, in 2002, ratified Kyoto. You don't hear the word Kyoto mentioned anymore. Why? Because, of course, the previous government signed the Kyoto Protocol, but did very little to actually set hard targets and work towards reducing. By the time this government came in as a minority government, it was clear that trying to meet Kyoto was increasingly difficult. But I don't think that that's an excuse for saying, no, we're not obligated. This is an international treaty that, after Mr. Putin ratified, became a binding law for all of the countries that had signed on to Kyoto. And I don't get it. I don't get the fact that we've now just said, that's got nothing to do for us. And for 2 years, we've seen what? Nothing. The disbanding of the few programs that the Liberals had in place. But where is the setting of the really hard targets to get us onto a reduction path? Now, everybody's screaming about a carbon tax. You know, Sweden is not a bad country in terms of industrial competitiveness around the world. They're a northern country like Canada. They've got every reason to say, oh, we can't reduce our carbon footprint because we're a northern country. Do you know how much they pay for on a carbon tax in Sweden? $150 a ton.
And we're
in British Columbia, we're yelling and screaming at a $10 tax.
Yeah. Now, well, where are we internationally now, Mr. Suzuki? Where is Canada on the environmental front internationally?
Well, all I can say is thank goodness for the United States, or we'd be absolutely rock bottom. I mean, Canada's record, as well as our legislation to deal with the environment, is very, very poor. We've rated Canada in the OECD countries. We come out right down in the bottom 3 of the 29 countries that we've assessed. Canada's record is very, very bad, and as Jeffrey Simpson has pointed out in his recent book, every time we have a crisis, you know, in 73 with the oil embargo by the OPEC countries, what does Canada do with this crisis as prices begin to skyrocket? We set up a committee to look at it. We set up committee after committee after committee. In 1977, this is a committee that Ursula Franklin, one of Canada's eminent scientists, was set up to look at the consequences of rising oil prices after the Arab oil embargo. She came out with a report called Canada as a Conserver Society. In 1977, she said Canada ought to be much more efficient in the way we use our resources. We should use far less. We should get on to renewable alternative energy and become a world leader in this. 1977.
Yeah.
And now what did we do? We ignored it, and now Denmark and Sweden and Germany, countries that took the challenge seriously, are well on their way to becoming the global leaders in renewable energy.
So are you saying that the Harper government is failing us on the environment?
Absolutely.
No question?
Absolutely. And, you know, right now, everybody is focused on what? The next election. Everybody there in Ottawa is concerned about getting reelected. Well, guess what? Children don't vote. So these guys are focused on how they get the most votes in the next election. And yet, while they're fiddling, the climate is changing. Our emissions continue to rise. Polar bears are endangered. Why? Because there isn't enough ice out there. And we're fiddling around. We're not, you know, what's an aspirational target, which is what Canada's great addition to the discussion is. It seems to me an aspirational target is not much different from voluntary compliance. You go to the big emitters and say, oh, please, please, be good guys. This is the target we want. Please try to achieve it. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. We've had 30 years of aspirational targets, and it doesn't work. Let's get on with setting hard targets, thinking more about what we're leaving our children and grandchildren.
Mr. Suzuki, thank you very much for your time. Informative as always.